out of the life of a man who became very dear to me about 3 winters ago. I read of his life in a book entitled South, as the snow and the ice and the wind beat outside our Peoria home. I was covered deep under several blankets.
I'm not making fun of
The
you.
electric blanket long since being
His
discarded.
voice just sure doesn't look like his picture.
The man's name's Sir Ernest Shackleton. In December of 1914, this British polar explorer set off with 27 men to traverse Antarctica. Their mission was trapped for 10 months on the Weddell Sea by unseasonable ice. They never touched the continent of Antarctica.
Almost at the end.
On October 27,
He's going to run out of tape
1915,
before his
the
sermon's
Endurance,
finished. I'm sure
their
he
ship,
didn't stop and wait for
was
him to flip the
crushed
tape over.
by closing ice. They lived for
So there's gonna
3
be a hole
freezing
in the
months
middle.
and made progress north on an ice floe,
Maybe so.
bearing cold and hunger, isolation and anxiety. The ice began to break up, and these 27 men continued in 3 small boats to a barren island refuge, traveling north by east, the island Elephant Island. There on a narrow sandy beach, they endured, those survivors, 4.5 months of 70 to 90 mile per hour winds under a constant pall of fog and snow, where they existed on seaweed and ground up seal bones.
Yeah.
While the leader and 4 other men, while Shackleton made his way to South Georgia Island in a single boat, some 800 miles north and east. Arriving at South Georgia Island, they arrived at the uninhabited side of the island and needed to cross the island to a whaling station. And so they crossed in a forced march 36 hours through snowfields and glaciers, up and down mountains and covering snow-filled valleys where they were waist deep in snow. Shackleton returned for his men after reaching the whaling station and brought all 22, after 4.5 months, back alive. His own physical and mental endurance. I finished the book simply awed by what a man, or as we would say today, what a person can be and do. These were Shackleton's words as they came down a 30-foot waterfall, sheer ice cliffs on either side, 1.5 miles from the whaling station. At the bottom of the fall, we were able to stand again on dry land. The rope could not be recovered. We had flung down the adze from the top of the fall, and the logbook and the cooker wrapped in one of our blouses. That was all, except our wet clothes, which we had entered. That was all, except our wet clothes that we brought out of Antarctica, which we had entered a year and a half before with well-found ship, full equipment, and high hopes. That was all of the tangible things. But in memories, we were rich. We had pierced the veneer of outside things. We had suffered, starved, and triumphed, groveled down, yet grasped at glory, grown bigger in the bigness of the whole, We had seen God in his splendor, heard the text that nature renders. We had reached the naked soul of man. In 1965, in the Springfield Church, in the basement of that church, we held a youth group officers meeting. And after a year of bowling and picnics and paper drives and roller skating parties and case after case of cokes, and facing a situation of declining attendance, of a lack of interest and expectation, we were facing the question as a group of officers, what's wrong? Sophomore girl, after a rather lengthy discussion, said rather quietly, I believe the question should be what's missing. I believe it's worship that's missing. I believe we're out of touch with our leader, Jesus. That was a sharing that was to deepen for the next 2.5 years, that youth group in Springfield, Illinois. Followers of the way indicates a leader of the way. A leader whose leadership was so fresh, so significant, so filled with a rush of power. A leadership which left in the quiet eddies of its wake transformed lives. A leader who felt the full orb of his life and the reality and potentiality of its influence on the hearts and lives of persons, who saw his life so out of pace with the static religious life of his day, but who felt such a sense of rightness about his own life that one day he was quietly, and I believe humbly, to speak the words, I am the way. In 34, 35, and 36 AD, those who took up their crosses and followed him were to call themselves and be called by their enemies followers of the way. The expression is so vastly appealing to me. The phrase suggests commitment. It suggests a journey. It suggests a moving out from. It suggests growth and risk and vulnerability and mobility and community and direction and humility. I am a Christian. I, Bill Fairbank. I am a follower of the way. I am not asking that one supplant the other, but rather that they be held in creative tension, that one might enliven the other. The way and the waymarks. I found, have found, the Beatitudes as the waymarks of the way. The Beatitude, the blessing lies not in attainment, not in the arrival at a goal, but in the way, in the spirit, in the search, and in the march. Here the blessed life, the happy life, is seen in contrast to that of the Pharisee. The pity of the Pharisee's aim was that it could be reached. His aim could be reached. He gets reward through the keeping of a fixed law. Beyond this, there are no worlds to conquer. The immediate effect of the achievement, then, is conceit and self-satisfaction. There is in his mind an equation between goodness and prosperity, between righteousness and success. If thou hast made the Most High thy habitation, there shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. The person who has loss or trouble, according to the Pharisee, or suffering, must have been an overt or a secret sinner. Waymark number 1 from the Beatitudes is this: oh, the bliss of the man who longs for righteousness, in the words of Barclay, as a starving man longs for food, and a man perishing of thirst longs for water. for that man will be truly satisfied. Christ does not call the righteous person the happy man. He does not pronounce the attainment of righteousness blessed, because a righteousness that gets attained is always external and conventional. It is a kind that has definable quantitative limits. How many times must I forgive my brother? Who is my neighbor? The beatitude attaches rather to hunger and thirst for goodness. It attaches to the aspiration and not the attainment. The aspiration is singled out for blessing. In the popular estimate, happiness consists in getting desires satisfied. For Christ, the real concern is to get new and greater desires. Desires for infinite things. The reach must always exceed the grasp. The heart must forever be throbbing for an attainment that is beyond any present consummation. It is the glory of going on, the joy of discovering unwon territory.
Good morning, Vietnam!
Spiritual conquest. The joy, then, the joy is in the aspiration.
What?
I feel somewhat
Good morning,
pleased that
Vietnam.
I'm speaking to you
You ever
about
had a seat of
my
movie?
dear friend Herb
Yeah.
Gracie,
I did.
since he is a friend
Sitting
of
behind
many
the
of
glass.
yours as well,
Mm.
for all of time.
The sound is really,
And I
really
can
good.
remember Herb talking to me and others about his plans for a spiritual
But we'll have
life
to see if it is
retreat
on the
in
tape too,
his
on the
cabin
computer, but
in
it should be.
Algonquin Provincial Park in Canada.
See, that's when he went
And I
to
can remember
Hmm?
a friend of mine
Algonquin
asking,
Provincial
well,
Park
what
in Canada.
will
That's when he
be
was
the
on his way
reason
to
for our
Alaska.
going? Will it be helpful for our sermons? What will we discuss? And I can remember Herb saying, I hope that it could be for us, for our own growth as Christian men. I hope to get away for a few days with you so that we might grow in love for Him. And you know how Herb would say those words. Reaching till we die. Hungering and thirsting for righteousness. And the beautiful humility of his life. Waymark number 2, the poverty of spirit. The poor in spirit are by no means poor-spirited. They are persons who see so much to be, so much to do,
Signal me when it's
such
done.
limitless reaches to life and goodness that
Signal
they are
me when it's
profoundly
done.
conscious of their insufficiency and their
Okay, Joan.
incompleteness.
Bring this back in.
Self-satisfaction and pride of spiritual
Don't
achievement
move my
are
splicing
warped clean
stuff,
out of
though.
their nature.
Your what?
They are
The stuff that
open-hearted,
to splice
open
tapes, because I
window
may need to
to
do
all
it
truth,
Oh,
again.
possessed of an abiding disposition to receive, impressed with a sense of inner need and of childlike dependence. Waymark number 3, the beatitude of the mourner. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Losses and crosses, pains and burdens, heartaches and bereavements, empty chairs and darkened windows are the antithesis of our desires, and last of all things to be expected in the list of Beatitudes. They were then and still often are counted as visitations of divine disapproval. But Christ rejects this superficial way of measuring the success of a life by the smoothness of its road or by its freedom from trial, and he will not allow the false view to stand, namely that success is the reward of piety and trouble the return for a lack of righteousness. The key in this beatitude, the very discovery of the nearness of God, of the sustaining power of his love, of the sufficiency of his grace, has come to men of all ages through pain and suffering and loss. There are some of us in these very hours that are experiencing the dark night of the soul. I have no other way of describing it. The dark night of the soul. There are men and there are women who in life the saucer of the dark night of the soul have found the nearness of God, of his sustaining power, of the sufficiency of his grace. This was what Sir Ernest Shackleton was expressing at the foot of the Nicey waterfall. Well, we could speak of the meek and the merciful and the peacemakers, but I promise not to do that this summer. My dear friends, I spoke to you at the beginning of our words this morning about Sir Ernest Shackleton. There is a leader of men, a leader of women, that moves me even more deeply. It's Jesus the Nazarene, that explorer of the continent between God and man. There in the wilderness of Judea, the shores of the Sea of Galilee, and on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea near Tyre and Sidon, on the Mount of Transfiguration, this explorer of that continent between God and man was to say, God and man do meet. For he found the divine tides beating into his own personal being. And that the word that he used, the word that he asked us to use, for that one, the force, it's the word Abba, Father. It's exciting to me. It's just thrilling to me to follow his leadership, to be a follower of the way, and to know that out in this place, we become toned, trained, and perhaps inspired on some Sundays for that which lies out there, the actual following of the way, being the meek, being the peacemaker, being the mourner, being that one who hungers and thirsts for righteousness. May God add his blessing to who's sharing with